GM, welcome to Web3 Academy, a place for entrepreneurs, business professionals, and creators to learn how to use Web3 to build sustainable business models and thriving communities. I'm Jay Bird, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Kyle Reedhead. What's up, Kai?
What's up, friends? How are you today?
Today on the show, we are joined by Jerry Chu, the CEO and co-founder of Lofty. We're going to be talking about how he's turning houses into tokens and disrupting real estate with Web3.
We love tokens. I'm kidding, but real estate really, what I learned from this is the perfect example of how blockchain technology solves just like a specific real world problem. Blockchain can just make the real estate industry so much more efficient. And if you've ever been in this industry, you'll realize it is the least efficient industry, I think, in the world. But really, some of the things that it can do that we learned is it gets rid of the long transaction times that are also riddled with insane fees. So it can kind of get rid of a lot of that. It enables you to not have to have these crazy high down payments to get a house. And it also makes the real estate market more liquid, which is huge for owners anyway. So Lofty is solving this problem by creating a marketplace that enables anyone to purchase a fraction of a house and share ownership of it. So ultimately you get to own a house with a bunch of strangers, which is quite interesting. So we sort of dive into the realities of owning a house with strangers and making decisions via decentralized governance, so DAOs, and how tech can actually make this more seamless. Ultimately, their goal here is just by putting real estate on chain is trying to create more freedom, more flexibility for our finances, which is huge.
Yeah, one thing that really stood out to me was the stat that Jerry shared, which is that 70% of their owners are not crypto native. So clearly they are solving a problem that really matters to people regardless of the blockchain tech and the crypto. Like, these are not people who care about, oh, I have crypto and I want to invest in more crypto things. These are people who just want to invest in real estate because they want to get into that asset class because it's an opportunity to build generational wealth. And it's amazing.
I love it.
Real business. Yeah, this is real utility right here. Real utility. And Jerry talks about how they onboarded those people because those people don't have crypto wallets. And so Jerry takes us through what they have done in order to enable these people to participate on the blockchain. And a lot of these people don't even necessarily know that that's what they're doing. So very, very interesting. Jerry is just an absolute giga brain, so smart, so much knowledge to share. So obviously he's one of the founders and CEOs of Lofty. Now, prior to founding Lofty in 2018, Jerry worked as a quantitative risk management analysis. There's a title for you, Kai, at Barclays, where he was in charge of their treasury risk department. He also has a bachelor's in mathematics and economics and a master's in financial engineering. He's much smarter than Kyle or myself. So you're really going to enjoy this episode because Jerry is so great at explaining really complex things in a really simple way and showing how this is creating real business utility for the real estate industry and for real estate investors. Super stoked on this episode. Before we jump in, let's just take a minute to hear from our sponsors.
The future of social media is here, and that future lives in Web3 on top of Lens protocol. Web2 social platforms are broken and ripe for disruption. You see, the epicenter of social media is the creators, and yet they are the most neglected. Web2 platforms like Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram are all essentially robbing creators of their worth. Creators are a new type of entrepreneur, forming new types of businesses. Yet with Web2 platforms, creators don't own their content or their profiles, and that's their product and business. Instead, they are tied to the platforms they choose to create on. Well, just like how crypto is freeing us from banks, Web3 is freeing us from these centralized platforms. On Lens protocol, creators own their content, own their profile, and even their social graph and followers in the form of NFTs. This allows you to move freely from one social application to another with your content, profile, and followers moving along with you. Lens protocol enables self-sovereignty for your social graph and interoperability across the internet. At Web3 Academy, we believe this is the future of social, and that's why we've partnered with Lens to ensure that the path of social media is heading in the right direction. Visit lens.xyz to learn more today.
Unlock Protocol is the NFT membership protocol for Web3. Content subscriptions, community access, event tickets are all forms of memberships, one of the most common business models for creators and entrepreneurs today. Building an NFT membership opens many new possibilities for your members. everything from tailored multi-platform experiences to the ability to sell an unfinished subscription on secondary markets. These are things just not possible in Web 2. However, in order for this business model to work, creators need NFTs which are time-bound or have built-in recurring payments. Unlock Protocol does this for your NFTs. Better yet, with a few simple steps, you can create your own NFT contract without code. What WordPress has done for websites, Unlock Protocol is doing for membership NFTs. If you're an NFT creator, you can't rely on royalties as they are likely going to zero. You need recurring revenue. You need Unlock. At Web3 Academy, we believe NFT memberships are the future of business and community. And that's why we decided to build on Unlock. Learn more at unlock-protocol.com. Today, we have with us Jerry, the CEO of Lofty, to talk about fractionalized real estate. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. Really appreciate being here.
We were both, Kyle and I, very excited for this episode for several reasons. One, we both bought a house in the last year. Kyle is actually currently in the process of buying a house.
Yes.
Kyle,
congratulations to you both, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Kai, when's your close date on that?
December 21st. So probably going to close before this episode comes out, I think.
Yeah, probably. We've both gone through the current super old school traditional way of transacting on a house, and we faced that problem. But we also both appreciate, and the reason we bought a house is because we both want to invest in real estate, and we see the huge potential of diversifying our portfolio and of being a part of real estate. Now, we're lucky that we had the opportunity to do so, but we know that many people don't. So I think where we should start today's episode is, Jerry, just what was the problem that you faced that led you to create Lofty? What problems did you want to solve?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So at Lofty, we just noticed that there was this big problem happening in society that was affecting everyone, including ourselves. And that was basically the phenomenon where you see asset values rising at a much faster pace than wage growth, right? And you have this phenomenon where people can't own certain assets. And what happens is then people in society ask, why do the rich get richer while the poor stay poor? And the answer is basically, well, certain assets that the wealthy have access to, once they invest and own these assets, they basically don't do anything, and it just sits there and sort of prints money for them, if you will, right? It grows in value, and it grows in value at a very rapid rate in certain economic conditions, and they don't have to do anything extra. And folks who don't have access to these asset classes end up having to work and trade their time for money, and that never keeps up with the rate at which asset classes can grow. And so real estate is probably one of these largest asset class that faces this problem, where it's one of the best assets for the creation and maintenance of wealth over generations, right? And not just in the United States or Canada, but all around the world. And the sad thing is the vast majority of people can't afford to invest or own real estate. And that's a huge problem. And when you have this sort of bigger divide between people who have money, wealth, and people who don't, you have a sort of unstable society, and basically bad things happen. And you can see this throughout history in various countries, and nobody wants that to happen, right, to a country that you're living in. So we dealt with that ourselves, where pretty much we went around the table, engineers and founders of the company, and was like, hey, we would all love to sort of invest and own real estate, but none of us do. And like, well, why not? Right. And so we realized it's mainly due to three major problems, which is number one, is just really expensive, right? So if you can't get the mortgage, or you don't have the cash to just buy the house outright, you just can't afford it. So there's not much you can do beyond that. Then the second issue is the outdated legacy transaction system, which we can definitely talk about more because you guys have experienced it at this point. Here in the US, at least, it can take upwards of 70 days to close on a property. And this entire time, you're doing all this work, hiring and firing middlemen, and everyone's trying to take a piece.
Everyone's
out of
taking
you,
a piece.
1% here, 0.5% there, like just adding all these fees. It's really unpleasant and draining. And so for some people who even have the money, real estate is not a desirable asset class to enter into, because you have alternative now where you can go on your stockbroker account or Coinbase and just deploy $250,000 in less than 5 minutes versus going through this process. And then the last issue is a lack of liquidity, right? Which is scary for a lot of people. If you bought a house and something happened in life, which happens to some people, and you needed to sell very quickly, chances are you're going to lose a lot of money, because real estate isn't very liquid. You're going to have to hire a realtor again. They take 6% from you just right off the bat, even if you sold at the same price at which you bought it. But realistically, if you want to liquidate quickly in a week, in a month, you probably have to discount your price, right? And so for people who just have enough money to buy that first house, or just enough money to buy that rental property, it's very scary to be like, I'm going to put 100% of these funds into this one asset. And what if something goes wrong and I need to liquidate it quickly, right? And so for those three reasons, this asset class is just not accessible to everyday people. And then we realized, by just looking around the industry and looking at how technology has developed, that if you put the ownership of real estate on chain, on the blockchain, you can actually solve for all three problems at the exact same time, right? And so that's what we've done at Lofty. We turn houses into tokens that people can trade. And what that means is you can become a co-owner in a property with other people and rent this property out for rental income, and you would still benefit from the appreciation. And that means you have the flexibility to buy any portion of the house with minimum starting at as low as $50, right? And so now literally anyone who has an interest or want to own and invest in houses is now able to do it. So the affordability problem goes away. Then our process is exactly the same as Coinbase or Robinhood, what people are used to. It takes you less than 5 minutes to sign up for an account. And all of the sort of annoying legacy transactional system has been eroded away and fixed with technology. So that means you can create an account, get started buying and investing in property right away. You're not dealing with that 70-day process anymore. And then lastly, there's liquidity. If you bought 2 tokens, right? You only bought $100 worth of a house. You can then change your mind 5 minutes later and say, this isn't for me. And you can sell those 2 tokens to other people directly, peer to peer, who would have an interest. Oh, I would love to own 2 tokens in this one property for $100. So they will buy it off your hands. So that makes it a lot more liquid. So you don't have this lockup period. You don't have to worry about the liquid nature of real estate traditionally. And so that's exactly what we've done and how we've solved the problem.
This is incredible. And I have so many questions, but let me just start here to set some context. You say you've basically taken homes and put them on the blockchain. One, like, what does that really mean? And I wonder if we can explain that to the audience, just so like we can understand, what does it mean to put a house on a blockchain? Is it like the contract? Is it like, what are we really putting on there? And just connect the dots there. And then you talked about how you can own parts of it. And this is more kind of investing. Like, what if I want to own it and live in it, right? Like, I can't just go on OpenSea or whatever the Lofty platform is and just buy a home and now all of a sudden I'm in it, right? So just talk about how that works, just so we can wrap our head around this a little bit.
Definitely. Those are great questions. So just to start off with your first question, how does it work exactly, right? So the way it works is we're a pure marketplace. So we don't actually own any of the houses and properties you see on our platform. And we take that actually very seriously. We don't want to be trading against our customers. We don't want to be flipping houses to our customers. That doesn't make any sense, right? Huge conflict of interest. So we're a pure marketplace. And what that means is, traditionally, just like how real estate market currently works, there are buyers and sellers. So someone who wants to sell their house will come, and instead of maybe using a real estate agent or listing it, I actually don't know what we have in Canada, but in the US, there's an MLS system. But instead of using these and using a realtor, they can come list it on Lofty's marketplace, where I have this house for sale. I would like to sell it for $300,000 or whatever the price is, right? And that's now listed on our platform. Then collectively, we allow a group of people to come in together and say, I don't have the funds to buy this house outright by myself, right? But, we can maybe pool our money together and buy it together. And collectively, we would own and manage the property together. So the way we facilitate that is, underneath, we're creating a business entity that is formed in the United States, in the state of Wyoming, and is actually called a DAO LLC. And essentially, it is specifically called an algorithmically managed DAO LLC. And what that means is, legally speaking, this entity has no manager. It has no CEO. It has no board of directors. It doesn't have one singular person or entity in charge. Instead, every owner of this entity has equal voting rights and equal power and equal managerial sort of decision-making power. Just like how democracy was originally created and invented by the Greeks, like you would go to this town square and every person who's eligible would cast a single vote, and there was no elected representative or anything like that. And so what ends up happening is if enough funds are pooled together where you can now afford to purchase the property, that process occurs and the seller basically sells the house and the deed transfers over to the DAO LLC, right? And then you collectively each become a member or owner in this DAO LLC. And that indirectly is how you would own part of a house with someone else, right? The company actually, the DAO actually owns the house, but you own, let's say, 5% of the company. Therefore, the company doesn't do anything else. It doesn't have any other assets on its balance sheet or its holdings. And so indirectly, you own 5% of that house, which means if it's ever sold, you get 5% of the proceeds. If it's ever being rented out and it's collecting rent, then legally you're entitled to 5% of the rental income, and so on and so forth. So that's how you sort of tokenize or fractionalize and create co-ownership opportunities for people in these houses. Now, the last part is, well, what if you want to live in it? What if you don't want to co-own it with people? That's a beauty about the blockchain technology, which is it's infinitely flexible. You can do whatever you want with it, right? And so imagine this scenario. You do have the funds to purchase the house. So you do it the same way, but instead of a bunch of owners in the DAO, you're the only owner. And that's actually a very common practice where people would buy their houses under an LLC, right? And the reason they would do that, some people do it for identity protection. So celebrities actually do this quite often in the US because they don't want to just put their name on the title, because you can actually search it up in public records and be like, oh, like Brad Pitt lives right there. Let me like go outside his house and stalk him. Right? So you don't want that. So they create like random LLCs and you don't actually know who ultimately owns it. Another thing, the benefit it provides owning a property through an entity is liability protection, right? So if you own the property yourself directly, someone comes to your house, trips, they slip, they decide to sue you, which is a terrible thing to do. I don't know why people do these things, but some people do it. If you directly own the house and you're on the deed, all of your personal assets are liable, right? You're not only the house, but your car, your brokerage stock account, your cryptocurrency, everything is liable. And that's terrible. Whereas if you owned it through an LLC or an entity, they can't directly sue you because technically on paper, you aren't the owner. The entity or the LLC is the owner. And so they would sue the entity, and the entity holds no other assets other than the underlying house. So your maximum exposure, like worst case instance in a lawsuit like that, is you would lose the house, which is, again, not great, but much better than losing everything else along the way as well. So the technology is very flexible. You can definitely just, instead of buying the tokens with other people, you could just put in all the money, take ownership of all the tokens. And now, just like owning your own house through an LLC, you own your own house through a DAO. You don't need to vote on anything because you're the only owner or member. You can just move right in. They'll give you the keys and then basically own and live in your house just a traditional way. And so that's how that would be done.
And I guess if you ever needed liquidity, you could sell a little bit of your house, right? And there you go. That's very interesting.
So, sometimes people go, oh, I want to do some renovations instead of coming up with the cash. Right. So there are tools available where you can refinance your property. But here's the thing, it's not very flexible. If you go to a bank and say, I want to refinance $3,000 of my house, they'd be like, no, we don't do that.
Right.
Like, that's not like the underwriting process, that the back office they're dealing with, just to do the paperwork is going to cost the bank probably more than that amount of money. So they're not interested. Right. But with this process, you could just be like, I'll liquidate $3,000 worth of tokens, and now you have those funds, and then you buy them back later when you no longer need those funds.
So the ownership, I get, they own the deed. The deed is still written, probably needs to be signed by a lawyer and all that stuff, right? But the ownership of it, because it becomes fractionalized as a token, that makes sense to me. Do you think that at some point that deed ends up just becoming like an NFT, and now we don't even need that whole paperwork side of things to actually exchange ownership of a home? How far into this real estate world does it get on chain? I'm curious.
Yeah, so that's a part where it becomes a projection, right? And so a lot of people are asking why it hasn't already happened. And the answer is, again, I can't speak too much for the system in Canada, but I can say it for the US, which is that deeds are recorded at the county offices here in the US. And there's a lot of counties in the entire country, right? So think of these as like your local municipal governments or something. They're like the little small fiefdoms, if you will. And they're the ones who are actually responsible for verifying, oh, okay, person A sold it to person B holds the title now. This is all legit. And they would keep it in the county records. That process takes a really long time. And government officials and government departments are very slow to adopting technology, right? And they don't want to spend more money, obviously. And so for the deed to actually just be an NFT and be on the blockchain itself, what you actually have to do is some organization or a company or a person, someone has to come and build free software, like completely free, that is super user friendly, and then approach every single county government and say, hey, instead of doing it this traditional way, why don't you just record the deed on the software I built for you on this system, right? And the counties have to agree. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I actually think it's guaranteed to happen at some point. It's more about a question of when and who is ultimately going to go out and do this, because it isn't as simple as just saying, oh, we'll just start doing this now. You have to convince every single county to buy into this process, right? And then your software can have a subscription fee or anything like that, because again, county records have to be public. So you legally cannot charge for this. So who's going to maintain the servers and build all this out and fix the bugs and deal with all this and not make a single dollar from it, which is really hard. So maybe one day the government itself will do it. Maybe someday, I've always joked internally, if Lofty ever becomes a huge mega billion-dollar corporation one day, we would just do it for free. Like, why not? We believe in this future, so we would just sponsor that. But somebody has to go and do this. And that's why it's been very difficult to just do it now.
Right. Makes sense. Because to me, I was like, it seems so obvious that this is where it goes. Because when I had to hire a lawyer, and then I don't even know what the lawyer did. Basically, just signed a form that was like, yeah, we're going to transfer ownership. I was like, that was it. Pay him like whatever $1,000 or something. I'm like, that was so useless. Like, why did I have to do that? Like, this thing on the blockchain already. What are we doing here? But it makes sense. Practically, it's much more difficult than it is idealistically. But
you probably had to use a fax machine, which who the heck has one of those?
Had to print the piece of paper and hand sign it and then mail it to them. And I was like, and I had to upload it to the site. And I was like, why? I was so mad.
Okay. I want to get into the DAO governance model that you mentioned before, because I think that's really interesting. But before we get there, I just want to touch on the fact that you guys have created a marketplace. And whenever you make a marketplace, obviously you have the cold start problem, right? Of getting buyers and sellers. And so I'm just curious, how have you guys approached that, and what has been the success to date? Because I think you guys have been, I don't know your exact numbers, but you've sold quite a bit through the marketplace. So yeah, how did you make a marketplace? Did you get the sellers first? Did you get the buyers first? How did you get them on board and make that happen?
And how does that work? Tell us a little bit of that process of, you get someone, you're like, hey, let's tokenize your house. And they're like, sure, okay.
Yeah,
How do you do that?
Great question. So we were actually quite fortunate. So going back into Lofty's history as a company, we didn't actually start off trying to solve this problem, right? We actually started off as a AI SaaS software for real estate investors, right? And we had built that software and we were running, and we had customers, and we actually grew quite a bit at one point. And so we were very close with our customers. We went through Y Combinator, which is a startup accelerator based out of San Francisco, the Bay Area. And they basically taught us to always talk to your customers, especially initially, like your first customer, like constantly talk to your customers to understand what their actual problems are. And then it's up to you to figure out a solution to solve their problems. But you need to target an actual pain point where someone's like begging for someone else to come along, like, please, I will pay anyone money to fix this for me, right? So they encourage us to do that. It's been just drilled into us. And so from day one, we've been speaking to all of our users of the SaaS platform. And lo and behold, the users of a SaaS platform for real estate investors tended to be people who either want to buy or already own existing properties, houses, rental properties, and so forth. So we started, I wouldn't say be friends, but become more familiar with these people. We talk to them on the phone regularly. And so when we pivoted into the current business model and we needed to launch that first property, we were fortunate that we had this list of people that knew us, that actually enjoyed talking to us and felt like, hey, these are like smart engineers that could maybe solve a huge pain point in the market. So we basically just email blasted all of these former users and said, hey guys, we're launching a marketplace for real estate and we're going to sell properties on it, right? And here's the thing, we didn't mention the blockchain or the tokenization aspect because we knew that would potentially freak people out, confuse them, and just add a layer of complexity. But if you understand human psychology and you're thinking from the perspective of a seller, right? Imagine you're trying to sell your house. You really only care about two things, which is how much can I sell it for? And how quickly can I sell it for? Yeah. Beyond that, you really don't care like what's the actual mechanism for the sale, if it's a individual buying it, if it's a company buying it, if it's a group of people in a DAO, you really don't care about the details. So we just didn't say anything. And so lo and behold, there were certain users that came back. So yeah, I was actually thinking of selling this one property. I'm not in a huge hurry. I'm not desperate. I don't need liquidity. So why don't you guys list it on your platform? We'll see. If it doesn't sell in 2-3 months, I don't even care. Then we'll just delist it or something. So not very high risk here. So that's what we did. We just listed this one property. And then separately on the buyer side, we had already figured out the business model there. We were creating these DAOs and collectively and say, look, you can now collectively co-own and invest in real estate for as little as $50, which literally was not possible before, right? And just blew people's minds. Like you had college students, like young professionals who just graduated school and had student loan debt. And like, really? Like I can own real estate? Like I understand it's not 100% of it, but just the idea that I can even own a small piece of it at this age with my current finances, it's just insane. And so we just launched internally through Y Combinator, through their social groups and friends and family. I went on LinkedIn and I hit up every single high school person I remember from my old high school, just like people you knew, just hey, by the way, we're doing this. If you've ever been interested in buying or investing in property, it's now possible for you to do it this way.
Did they know it was
doing that? We sold the first property.
They
know, yeah, the buyers know it's on blockchain. The sellers were not aware. And the sellers legally didn't need to be aware because when they sell the house, it again goes through a traditional escrow system where the deed transfers and there's a title company. So they don't need to know anything about the blockchain. But that's how we bootstrapped and overcame the cold start problem to our marketplace.
That's great. Your point about focusing on developing relationships with your users and solving their problem is probably the best founder entrepreneur advice that anybody could get.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say it's an advice that universally works no matter what industry you're in. Your company is trying to sell drones to the defense industry or to the military, go talk to the buyers who are in the military. What are your needs? What do you want out of a drone, right? What problems are you facing? You're selling SaaS software to students, same thing. What are your problems? It's the one thing that's universally true.
Let's say I buy some tokens on Lofty and I now own part of a house. How do we manage this as a collective? I'm guessing I don't know who the other owners are, or how am I connected with them? How do we make decisions? Like this is a rental property, the furnace breaks down and we need to replace the furnace. How do we decide? Making decisions as a group is difficult, right?
Yeah.
Particularly when it involves money. So how do we manage that process?
Not a Discord group, right?
Yeah, not a Discord. A Discord group exists, but that's not the mechanism for managing and voting. But people do have discussions there, right? Which I'll dive deeper into. But that's a great question. And so it's basically this concept of decentralized governance, right? So what does that mean? It basically is exactly what you said. It's when a group of people who don't know the identities of other people in this group can somehow collectively work together to manage something in their own self-interest, in the group self-interest, if you will, right? And all of your incentives are aligned because you're all co-owners in this property. So I don't think anyone comes into this group thinking, I want to lose all of my money, right? Everyone's interest is we want this house to do well. We want to earn more rental income. We want the price to appreciate more, right? So your incentives are aligned. And because of that, you can collectively manage something even though you're not aware of each other's identity. But the exact mechanism for how this works is we have what's called a governance program, right? And so the governance program works in this way. So the underlying property actually has a third-party property management company that you as a group collectively have hired, right? And you actually get to choose this. And people have fired their property managers and put new ones into place, right? And we've already seen these votes go out, and it's been done. But essentially, there's someone boots on the ground who's actually answering the call at 2 a.m. when someone's like, oh, the toilet doesn't work, like the pipe is leaking or something. So you personally don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. to go fix something for one of your tenants. There's a professional company doing that for you, right? And you don't actually have to pay them cash out of pocket either. The way these companies make money and bill you is actually by taking a portion of the rental income earned, right? So you would rent these houses out, there would be a tenant there, and every month they're paying rent. And these property management companies would say get 5 or 10%, some percentage of the monthly gross rent, right? And then you would keep the rest. So that's how you would pay them. And so now you have this company that is doing the boots on the ground stuff, actually making the repairs, actually dealing with the tenants, actually collecting the rent. So you are just the manager. You don't have to physically go do anything. You just have to make decisions. And that decision making just needs to be connected with the property manager's operations. And so we build the technology where the platform that connects this. So our property manager basically comes to Lofty and report issues like, hey, the tenant wants new shelving installed in their bedroom closet, right? This is not a legally required repair, right? But they would just like to have it as something nice to have. We've looked at the scope of this, and based on our contractors' rates, we estimate this would be like $300 to $400. Do you want to do this? Yes or no, right? At which point we take this information and we send it out as a governance vote only to people who own tokens in that specific property. And basically you would get an email and you would just see, hey, your tenant at this property that you own is requesting you install shelving in their bedroom closet. Do you want to do it? Yes or no? And then the property manager will even provide you with some basic context and guidance of like, hey, you legally don't have to do it, but this tenant has never been late on rent. So maybe if you do this, you'll keep them very happy. They'll renew, right? And you get more consistent cash flow from your investment, right? Or you could just deny it and save $300. Completely up to you. And so people read that, they form their own decisions. It's not that hard to understand, and it's not that hard to decide. And you basically vote and say, yes, I would like for the shelving to be installed, or no, I don't want to spend $300 to pay for this. And all the votes are then tallied up. One token equals one vote. And then finally, you would see what the vote comes out to. And for all of these DAOs, by default in the operating agreement, you actually need a 60% supermajority for any vote to be enacted on. So as long as the vote reaches 60% or above for one of the decisions, then it's okay, the DAO has come to a consensus, and that's a decision that will be carried out. We take that decision back to the property manager and say, the owners have decided to do this, right? And then that decision gets carried out. There's also some mechanisms to make sure that voting is always fair. For example, no person or entity can actually own more than 10% of a DAO, right? The tokens in a DAO. And that's to keep it fair. So someone doesn't come in and just own 51%, 60%, 70%. And then there's 40% other owners there, but they can just be like, oh, I get to do whatever I want. Sucks to be you guys. So this is to protect all the members of the DAO, so that even if you're a small time owner, you only have one token or two token, you feel like your voice is heard, right? And you don't feel like you're being strung along by sort of whales or people who own larger portions of the property.
So if I sell a few $1,000s of my house via tokens, I still own 98% of it or whatever, but I sold like a couple $1,000s to renovate, they can vote the same amount as me, or how does that work?
No, they cannot. So right now you actually can't do that. I was purely explaining from technology standpoint. So
Gotcha,
on Lofty's platform today, you're not able to come in and say, I'm living in this house that I own and I want to sell 10% or $3,000. It's just that the underlying blockchain technology and what we built allows you to do that. And maybe one day in the future, that is something we'll add as a piece. But of course, things would change in that instance where, that person probably shouldn't vote on how you're living in your house, despite being a part owner. But yeah, so there's all these mechanisms to make sure voting is fair, and that larger owners cannot just sort of dominate the small owners. And yeah, that's exactly how DAO ownership works and decentralized ownership works.
And so a couple follow-up questions. What sort of voting rates are you seeing? And what happens if the money is not is outside of what's available? Because I'm guessing that the money comes from rent or some sort of, is there a treasury? Like what if the upgrade is more than what is
Yeah.
currently available?
Yeah, great idea. A great question. So actually the way it works is you're exactly right. The DAO actually has a treasury that is pre-funded at the time of purchasing the property. So in addition to paying for the property, you're actually pre-funding a small allocation, which is usually 5 to 10%, depending on the condition of the property, where it's just sitting in cash. Every DAO has its own separate bank account. So the cash is segregated and it's just sitting there in a FDIC insured checking account or savings account, if you will, right? And when repairs need to be made, the funds are drawn from the treasury. It's called a maintenance reserve on our platform. The funds are drawn from there. And whenever a maintenance reserve starts being depleted, meaning funds have been drawn, and we didn't decide this is how decentralized governance work. People actually voted for this mechanism. 10% of the monthly rental income goes back into replenishing the DAO's treasury, right? And so this again can be changed at any time. People can call for a vote and change the rate. And then furthermore, if the maintenance reserve depletes by more than 50%, below 50%, right? People have voted to take 50% of the monthly rent to replenish it so that it replenishes at a faster rate. And that's how that mechanism works. And the voting rate has been incredibly high. So technically speaking, it's actually 100% on our platform. What I mean by that is we actually have what's called the automated governance. So can you imagine you own a bunch of properties in this way? You're in a bunch of DAOs and every day you're getting like 100 emails. That would be very annoying very quickly, right? So obviously we don't want that. You don't want that. And we realized that a lot of real estate management in this way for single family properties is fairly sort of consistent across the board, where the same situation comes up like over and over and over and over again. And so it's like you actually don't need people to revote on the same thing over and over again. And so what we do is when you create an account on Lofty, you have to answer this long list of sort of survey questions like, if this scenario were to happen, here are the choices. How would you want to handle it, right? And these are like, if the tenant doesn't pay on time, what do you want to do? Move to eviction right away. Ask the property manager to find out what the situation is. And then based on the property manager's discretion, maybe offer them some time to get caught up on the rent, right? Offer them immediately cash for keys or things like that. There are all these sort of standardized scenarios and options that will happen multiple times as a real estate investor and owner. And so you have to answer this list of questions and you can go back in and change it at a future date if you change your mind about a particular scenario. And when these scenarios come up, you don't actually get contacted to put in a vote. We already have your preferences set in the application. So we just internally run the vote and we just go back to the property manager and say, okay, the owners want to do this, right? And so only like very edge cases that are not covered by this automated governance process are manually voted on. And so this way people are very engaged, like they're not getting 1,000 votes a day and it becomes like a full-time job, right? It takes just seconds and it comes sporadically from time to time.
And the tenants probably get answers much faster this way as well, which is cool because I know even just like the place, I bought a condo. And so I basically have a similar thing. I have a condo, like a board that runs all the condos, and they do the same thing. If I want to do things, I ask them and make sure it gets approved and things like that. I'm already waiting for something. I haven't even moved in yet. And I'm asking for things. And, but I know it's going to take forever because that's just how it works. So I actually love that sort of automated idea. It's actually pretty smart. I'm curious, do you guys deal with then all of the finances? So let's say that the tenant is paying, and I assume they're paying in fiat currency. They're not paying in crypto. And so that's all done through you guys in the back end, and the owners don't have to deal with any of that kind of stuff?
Yes and no. So we don't touch or handle money. Like we're not the ones collecting the rental income and like depositing it for you and things like that. So the property manager is the one you hired is the one going to collect the rent, and they deposit it into their bank account, which they then send to the DAO's bank account on a monthly basis, right? From there, if you as an owner want to withdraw your rental income, right, we allow you to withdraw. And so we build the technology, the API integration that basically code that lets you move the money from the DAO's bank account that is owed to you, right? So like you can't go in and take 100% of the treasury. We have the code that doesn't let you do that. But, we have the record of, hey, you own, right? Again, all this is public information, which is what's great about the blockchain. Like we know this person It's holding 3 tokens, which is equal to 0.03% of the house, which means they're only allowed to withdraw 0.03% of the rent.
Right.
And now this month, the rent is $1,000. So simple maths. And using code this way, you're able to directly withdraw rent from the bank account whenever you want, that is owed to you, that you've earned, and you cannot touch other people's money, right? So our responsibility is only building the technology and maintaining that.
It's going to be really nice when all of that money flow is just on the blockchain. So rent is paid in crypto, or like a stable coin or something, and it goes right into it, and you don't have to have the middleman anymore. It'll just make it all so seamless for you. So I'm excited for that.
You can already do that. The user experience is the same. So we allow you to actually withdraw instead of in dollars in cryptocurrency. We allow users who aren't US based. So if you're a Canadian user and you don't want to withdraw US dollars and then transfer 30 cents to your bank account, super annoying, and wait all these days for the international transfer, you can actually withdraw in USDC, which is a stable coin pegged to the US dollar. You can just directly pull it into your crypto wallet and then go to an exchange and settle it yourself. And again, all of that is handled automatically for you in the back end. We build the tooling for that to happen, so you don't need to worry about it. But we're not directly sort of converting money for you or anything like that.
Right. That's amazing. So if someone wanted to sell, let's say there's a vote and I disagree with it, but they won, right? To, I don't know, put a hot tub in the back or something like that. And I'm like, no, this is a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And I can just, I guess the nice thing about this, I can just sell anytime, right? I just go, okay, screw it. I'm going to put my tokens up, and there
Absolutely. You can be like, wow, this group of people, I do not agree with their management style. I'm out of here. Someone else who likes what they're doing can come join this DAO instead. And here's another thing we've done at Lofty, which is typically in real estate, traditionally, you have information asymmetry between the buyers and the seller, where the sellers always know more about the property than the buyers do, right? And so it leads to a lot of bad behavior, right? And where people like withhold information, or technically I didn't legally have to disclose this, so I'm not going to disclose it. And this person didn't catch it, so sucks to be them, right? This one part of the house has a hole in it or something. All sorts of weird things can happen that way. And so what we've done at Lofty is actually whenever a property has any updates, like the tenant's delinquent, right? They're not paying their rent, or the DAO has voted to do certain things, we automatically update that onto the description page for the property. So if you're a potential new buyer into that property, you're like, hey, I'm thinking of maybe joining the DAO and being a co-owner in this property, you can actually scroll through and see all the property updates and be like, oh, wow, like this property is not earning any rental income right now. Oh, wow, there's this issue. They need to take money out from the treasury to fix. I don't know if I want to do that anymore. So this way, if you're trying to sell and leave the DAO because of some bad news, you're going to have to essentially deal with the fair market mechanisms where people might not pay you full price because there's some issues, right? So you have to sell at a discount. You can't just be like, haha, sucker, you don't know this thing's going on. I do. And I'm going to sell it to you at a crazy market value. The new person buys and is, oh, I got hoodwinked. So that doesn't happen at Lofty or through these mechanisms of ownership.
Ken, I'm going to put my DGen hat on for a second here.
Sure.
These tokens, these fractionalized tokens of the house, they sit in my wallet? Are they on the Lofty platform only?
Yeah, so self-custody. We don't custody for you, right? Not your keys, not your wallet. We are big proponents of that. But we've done something fairly interesting, which is we've built a hybrid model. So we realized, believe it or not, 70% of our user base aren't even Web3 people. Like they have no idea what is crypto. Like they have no interest in crypto. They're here for the real estate, right? And they're here for the ease of how they can now buy, own, and sell real estate, which is just never been the case historically before. And so we noticed there was at one point a 60% drop off in our sort of sign up funnel at the step where we said, hey, go download this third-party cryptocurrency wallet and then come back to our platform and connect it to your account. Like people were just like, what the hell is this? And then they were just gone. And so what we've done now at Lofty recently in the past few months is we launched this feature called the Lofty wallet, right? But it's not a centralized wallet that we control. It's using what's called a multi-sig technology, which means there's basically multiple signatures required for transactions. And so these wallets are individual wallets spun up on the blockchain. It has their own independent address and you control it because you actually get a key. But we also have a key, so we can do certain things for you, right? And so basically it gets automatically spun up with your account. And so people who don't understand anything about cryptocurrency or blockchain don't even need to know how wallets work. They just create a Lofty account. And they're like, oh, I'm buying, and it just all gets sent to this wallet because we have that separate key. There's also additional security benefits from that, where sometimes people forget one of the most unuser friendly things is when you create a wallet, it gives you like a list of 20 words or something like that. Memorize this and write it down. Yeah, and most people are like, what the hell is this? And they just click, okay, I've memorized it. Well, there are many times where people forget their passwords to the wallet or change phones or something like that. And now in order to recover their wallet and the funds, they need to get these secret passphrases, which they no longer have. And now they're locked out of their account permanently and they've just lost money. So because we also have a key, if this were to happen to you, we can rekey your wallet for you and just basically kind of like reset it and give you access again. So again, it's just very user friendly for beginners. And at any point in time, again, this is an independent self-custody wallet. You can be like, hey, I'm confident managing my own wallet. We're going to redo this and you don't get the key anymore. I'm going to spin off this wallet and deal with it myself, right? So that's something we've done to make basically this Web3 product a lot more accessible to people who don't know anything about blockchain. Right. And then additionally, of course, if you want to use external third-party wallets, you're welcome to use them and connect them. But all tokens are held on self-custody wallets. There's no centralized sort of exchange or custody function on Lofty.
Right. So the DeFi mallet, right? It's normal UX, Web2 UX in the front, and then it's actually blockchain tech in the back. But the reason why I asked and said DGen had is, can I then take those tokens and go to MakerDAO, for example, and grab a loan against the portion that I own on a house?
And that's a free market as long as MakerDAO allows you to do that, right? Their platform and their protocol operates with the blockchain that we use and these tokens on. And there is a willing and able party who's like, hey, I would like to be on the other side of this deal, then 100% you can go ahead and do that. We don't stop you. It is, after all, like real ownership. Like you've bought a house, right? Like we do make money, but we actually have broker's licenses. We basically just sell houses. We're like a real estate agent, basically. Right. That's how we make our money. We make like transaction fees at the front end. And then after that, we don't make any management fees or anything like that. It's purely you bought the house, you own it. And so it's yours to do with what you want, right?
Very interesting.
If I'm a seller, at what point does the sale happen? If I put it up on your marketplace, but only 10% of the tokens get purchased, do I have to wait until 100% get purchased until I get to cash out?
That's exactly it. So we basically give you, it's an offer, traditional real estate offer letter where it says, we're going to buy your house for X dollars, closing in 30 days or 45 days, right? And at which point, as time gets closer, you would hope your property is getting more and more fully funded. And as long as it's fully funded before the closing day, you would basically get a cash offer and this would all close, right? Now, in certain instances, people have not liked the prices that sellers have asked for. And they're like, I think this is too expensive. So that's one other thing I wanted to mention too, which is, again, we don't like information asymmetry at Lofty. So for every property, there's actually a documents tab, like hosted on the cloud, a Dropbox folder, basically, where you can go in, you can view appraisal reports, inspection reports, right? Everything about the property that you're thinking of maybe buying. So you have this, and basically you can do your own diligence. And people have done that and said, oh, the appraisal report says this property is worth $200,000. This person wants $240,000. I think it's too expensive, despite it being like pretty good condition, et cetera, et cetera. So there have been instances where a property has not been fully funded by the closing date, at which point we just go back to the seller and like, look, like it's not funded. Your choice. You can either pull the listing, we cancel this altogether, or you can adjust pricing. You can lower your price, and then maybe it would motivate people more. And people have done that in the past where they've dropped the price and then it gets closed, or people have been stubborn and said, you know what, I'll delist it. I'm not going to sell it through Lofty anymore, which is totally fine. At which point people who have contributed funds, we just refund them fully 100%. Like the DAO has not bought the property yet. So it just refunds you from the treasury and the DAO is actually spun down.
What's the current rate of sale on Lofty? Are most homes selling?
The vast majority do sell. We've tokenized or sort of onboarded 131 properties to date into our platform. And I think out of that number, so 5 did not. I believe it's either 5 or 6 did not close successfully, which means we've tried to tokenize like 135 properties. So the vast majority do close. People are reasonable. If you're motivated to sell your house and you're like, it's 80% filled, pretty close to selling it, I'm going to drop my price. It doesn't even have to be a lot. You don't have to go in and give a 50% discount or anything like that, but just dropping it by like sometimes 2%, 3%, it motivates people like, okay, this makes more sense for me now.
I heard that the owners can decide to donate the rent if through your platform. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, 100%. So that's something people aren't aware. So again, we're just a technology builder. The reason we like the blockchain and Web3 is that it creates more financial freedom for people. It creates more flexibility, more transparency, and that ultimately is good for the consumer. And so through this mechanism of owner, you're entitled to your portion of the rent. And because it's your portion, you can do with whatever you want with it without negatively impacting the other owners, right? And so again, if you own 10% of the house, and the rent was collected this month, you can choose to donate your earnings, and we will allow you to do that. It goes into a charity called Mercy Housing, which goes into providing affordable housing for folks here in the US, which is in many parts of the US and Canada as well. You have a lack of affordable housing, which is a big problem. And so it's completely optional. Not every user needs to opt into this. If you opt into this, you don't impact anyone else, right? And so it's, again, you're this group, you don't even know each other's identity. You can do things that are beneficial for yourself, like whatever you want to do, without negatively impacting the other owners.
Super interesting. Just one final question for me. I'm curious, in terms of adoption of this, I imagine if you market to the crypto world and people who understand crypto and all this stuff, they're probably like, yeah, I'll do this for sure, right? It's probably easy to get the buyers, I guess is what I'm saying, especially if they're crypto native. On the selling side, is that like the main kind of slowing point of adoption, or like what are you guys seeing just in terms of adoption?
Yeah, we're not really seeing slowdown. When I say difficult, I mean, like, obviously growing a business is difficult. Even if it's not hard to convince people to jump aboard, you have to reach out to them. You have to reach out to them at an affordable price, right? And things like that. And so that's always difficult. And in this modern age, you're constantly competing for attention. People have really short attention spans. Every other company is trying to reach out to the same set of consumers, so forth. So it's always going to be hard. But we haven't noticed a lot of difficulty sort of persuading people, as long as they actually do feel the pain point. On the seller side, this is, again, just this marketplace and ecosystem is a better way to sell your house. Why? Because we charge you lower fees. So if you're a seller traditionally, you hire a realtor and you go out and do all this, it can take you months sometimes to sell the property because the liquidity is so bad. Like, you need someone who can either get the mortgage with the down payment or someone who has enough cash. Like, one person has to be able to buy this entire house. When you open it up, right, on the purchaser side, hey, 1,000 people could collectively buy your house. You create a lot more liquidity and interest, which is much easier to sell your house. I'll throw out an interesting sort of fact that people might find surprising, but some of these houses have sold out in 8 seconds, fully filled. Right? If you were a seller, what ended up happening was you came to Lofty to sell your house. And instead of being charged 6% in the realtor fees, we only charge you 3%. So you get a 50% discount there. You got to dictate your listing price. So there's no haggling, right? You don't list it for $1 million and someone comes, I'll give you like 920, which is the case in traditional market and can be really annoying. We let the free market decide. If you list for too high of a price, again, there's appraisal reports in there. People, like, the address is there. People can look up the house on Zillow or 1,000 other listing services and really decide if it's worth that price. And if people don't think it's worth that price, you're not going to be able to sell it for that price, right? But there's no haggling involved. So a lot of sellers like that. And then you also don't have to schedule annoying tours where open houses and you gotta, like, hey, I gotta leave the house today because there's gonna be a full day of tours and things like that. That's annoying as well. And then on top of that, the biggest kicker at the very end is, again, sometimes we sell these houses in 8 seconds. So we close in 7 days, right? Which is much better than what you would traditionally see. And on top of that, there's no mortgages involved. There's no leverage. So you're getting an all cash offer. So you're guaranteed to close. And so from a seller's perspective, the vision here isn't blockchain Web3 technology cool? Don't you want to sell your house for as high of a price as possible,
Right.
as quickly as
Love that.
possible? Right? If so, come to Lofty. And then for buyers, it's also not, oh, Web3 is so cool and blockchain adoption. It's if you've wanted to own and invest in property before and couldn't afford it, now you can. There's no barriers to entry. It's easy process. Everyone can understand it, and you can collectively manage it in a fair way. So that the pitch is different to both sides of the market. And again, and as long as we're able to reach out to people at an affordable price, our conversion rate is very high, and our retention rate is also very high, which is proving out that there is this need, and people who do find us end up sort of sticking around pretty much forever. Our monthly churn rate is like below 1%. I think the lowest we've had was last month, and it was 0.7%. And so the industry standard is like, if you are a business, ideally you want it below 5%, but even that's not very good. Like you want it to be around like 2%, right? Where food's below that.
The thing I love about this is it's a real world use case that blockchain just improves for both sides, for the customer and the seller, right? So it's just, there is no speculation or any of this craziness that goes on in the crypto world. It's just a better technology to use than what we're using in the existing world before this. And so it just makes it better for everybody. That's the coolest part for me. I absolutely love it. If people also think that they love it just like I do, where do they find this? How do people get to your website or your socials or wherever people should go to learn more?
Sure. Our socials, you can go follow us on Twitter. So it's just Twitter. And if you search for Lofty AI, 2 words, you'll find us. We're the top option there. And then our website is just lofty.ai. So you'll be able to go see the website there. We have helpful blogs. We have helpful sort of certain articles we've written about certain common questions that people have. We have a sort of video up there, which explains in less than a minute exactly how all of this works. So it's pretty easy to get started with us.
I'm so fired up. I can't. I'm gonna go invest in something in Lofty. Where are the homes currently? Can Canadians invest? Is it just
Canadians can invest, and they're all over the place. Our goal is eventually, it's not so much a question of where, because it's going to be everywhere, right? You're going to have properties listed just by people. It's just our goal is we just convert the real estate market onto our platform. That's the end goal, right? But right now, again, it's a slow process. So most of the properties right now are in like sort of Midwestern states or the South. So you have properties in Tennessee, in Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, and like places like that. But we're constantly expanding. For example, there's one property in Miami. There's one in Texas as well, right? And so we're starting to expand to other states, other areas.
Incredible. Okay, let's wrap with a quick speed round. Unless, Jerry, is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience, with the listeners today?
No, I think that's a pretty in-depth dive into what we're working on. And again, if people have questions, we're happy. Like, this is what we do all day. We're super passionate about what we're working on. And if you let me talk forever, I'll basically never shut up about it. So if you guys have questions, reach out to us. We're happy to answer any and all questions for you.
Appreciate it. Okay, speed round. First question. What's an NFT you'll never sell?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we first started Loft, again, we started Lofty on a different business model, right? And so we try to get that to work, and it ultimately didn't work out. And so you learn as an entrepreneur, like what it means when like your product is really compelling to the market and to the customers, right? You see how like passionate they are about it and how interested they are about it. So the prior product just never sort of reached that level. But I remember very in vivid detail when we first launched Lofty, like after the first 1 or 2 properties sold, the community was so interested in this. Like we had people go out and create like NFTs using Lofty's logo, right? And they were like gifting it to us. Like, what's your wallet address? I'm sending this over. So I have these presents from our earliest users for when we're building this business. And so I'm never selling those. I'm keeping those forever.
That's awesome. Okay, if you were speaking to a founder who was early in the journey, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah, the best piece of advice I could give them is basically talk to your users. Do not, your day-to-day should not be coding or worrying too much about marketing or like all these things that kind of cost money and you will really drain your funding, or if you're sort of bootstrapping the company. Really what you should be figuring out exactly is talk to your user. How did they find you? Why did they look for you? What is the problem they're trying to solve? And like, how have they been trying to solve it? And you do this enough times, right? You start qualitatively sort of pattern matching in your head as an entrepreneur to eventually where you will get to that aha moment. Oh, this very specific thing is what people are having problems with. And they hate the process so much that they've been trying to like do things themselves to resolve it to no avail. And they're more than happy to pay someone else to come in and fix this problem. And when you get to that conclusion, that's when you build an actual successful business where you would have low churn, like your CAC for users will be low. Everything will just magically work itself out in a sense, because you found product market fit. You found people that have a problem that your product actually solves. And these are real problems, not sort of like a vitamin thing where like it makes their life slightly better. They're like, oh my God, like I can't live if someone doesn't solve this problem for me for this specific thing. And once you find that out, I mean, you're good to go. That's how you grow a business.
It's great advice. Thanks, Jerry. Okay, last question. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people were going to see, what would you write on it?
Yeah. And so this is a cliche, but it's really hug your loved ones, call your mother, call your dad, kiss your wife, compliment her, just treat the people around you really well and give them attention, tell them you love them. That's essentially it, because I can tell you we've gone through a lot of ups and downs at Lofty, and it's being a startup founder is not for the average person. I'm going to be very honest. Like, I think Elon Musk at one point said, if it's like chewing glass, like it's that painful, right? And he's not exaggerating. I think a lot of people who have never started something just can't really empathize with, because they just don't have the same experience. But if you talk to any other founder, any business owner who bootstrapped their business initially, they would all be like, I totally remember the pain. Like that, this is really miserable, and it can be really lonely. And so I realized over the years that no matter what happens at Lofty, or like we're having a good day, a bad day, something really bad happens, it's great to always go back and just have my wife there. We watch Netflix. Like it's this comfort that I think people take for granted, and you don't really notice it until something really bad happens to you, maybe in your professional life. And then you're like, oh, my wife still loves me. Crazy. Like, how does that work? Right? Maybe the world isn't ending, right? And so, yeah, that's something you realize when you've experienced those things.
That is phenomenal advice. I love that.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. I also feel like I can tell you're Canadian with advice like that. That's a Canadian right there. Spreading love.
We love people. We're just nice. We're nice folks.
Wonderful. Jerry, this has been fantastic. It's been so great to learn about Lofty, the problems you guys are solving, and really the potential of decentralized governance, decentralized ownership. I mean, I feel like we could have another episode where you could talk about the tech that you guys have built can extend probably so much further. And I'm sure you guys have many ideas there. But for this, we'll wrap this one up today. Thanks so much again, Jerry. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for having me on here. This was a blast, and I hope it was helpful and interesting to the listeners.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.